Hey everyone, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee, and my glasses are on. I'm talking today to Dr. Janis Whitlock. We're going to have a very interesting conversation, probably over and above and around, down below and right through everything you could possibly think of. So, Janis, tell us a little bit about yourself so people can get an idea of where we're going.
Okay, thank you, Joy. I'm so glad to be here with you and with your audience. My name is Janis Whitlock. I've traveled a pretty interesting path. I'd say probably the most important thing for folks here to know is I've both done the normal life things, all the things you'd expect. I was at Cornell for 25 years as a researcher in young adult and adolescent mental health and well-being, broadly conceived. A lot of work in suicide, self-injury prevention, earlier sexuality, human sexuality, and so forth. And I'm also what's called an experiencer, somebody who has had ongoing regular experiences of what we would think of as the anomalous, the things that are unseen, the forces that move through the world. Those have been ongoing since I can remember, and definitely informed deep interest in study of ancient wisdoms, indigenous wisdoms here in the US early on, and then later in my life in 2007 and 2008, I had what's called a Kundalini awakening, and I started to do a lot of meditation in the Siddha yogic lineages. So meditation, chanting, all the Eastern cosmology, and deep study of how they explained what reality is. And more recently, those paths kind of converged as we approached this kind of fascinating time we are all in, around areas of consciousness, unidentified phenomenon, unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, and non-human intelligence, and what's happening for and to humanity. So it is my passion at this point to bring my psychological know-hows, and PhD in developmental psychology, and my public health background, sort of how do we help humanity as a whole understand what's happening and how to adjust and adapt, and how do we help humans and the planet we live on thrive and grow and be experienced as the profound, amazing experience and adventure that it is.
What comes to mind is that most people would just identify it as woo-woo, but I'm some of most people, because sometimes I'm going, oh please. But it seems to me that a lot of the paranormal has merged with what we might consider, do I want to say some sort of a secular religion? It's a hard thing to explain because people can't live without religion. And I think we clearly see that. So people will say, it's not that I'm religious. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. Okay, whatever words you want to use. The basic point is we need to believe. We need to have faith. So the anomalous, this faith awakening, and new definitions of consciousness. Where we once thought, and I'm not a scientist and I don't pretend to be one on TV. We once thought that the brain and the chemicals in the brain were creating consciousness. And that's not necessarily what could be happening. It could be, the fact that consciousness is some electromagnetic and physical force that is getting received, and that it has awareness. So, this is the woo-woo moving into, oh, wait a minute, things are, some things may actually not be so woo-woo. There may actually be something to them. These things may be perceptions, our perceptions that we're actually projecting out. So not only am I afraid, but I'm actually creating that thing that I'm afraid of.
Right. Yeah, you could cover a lot of territory there.
I know. You know what just brought to my mind? Remember the movie Forbidden Planet? Do you remember that movie?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Where he creates the monster with that alien machine.
Yep.
So, those are all of my thoughts. We could start with, you mentioned that you had an awakening. What was that process like for you? Like, you didn't wake up on a Tuesday morning and go, wait a minute.
Well, you mean the Kundalini awakening that you referenced?
Yeah. You said that things
Yeah.
started to shift for you.
Yeah. Well, let me just quickly go back to the consciousness thing first, and then I'll come into that. The hard problem of consciousness has been with us for a while. I mean, I vividly remember when I was at Cornell and we they bought a magnet, an fMRI, to do fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, so that you could see what was happening in the brain. And that was this sweep throughout universities around the world. Tier 1 universities were trying to figure out, all right, we want to be the first to figure out the origin of life. And of course, it's in the brain, the origin of consciousness, not life. It's consciousness in the brain. And as of last year, that has not been what happened because it doesn't look like it's sitting in the brain. I mean, I don't think that some of the key proponents of that have completely given up, but they have lost some pretty significant bets with people who said, other scholars of various sorts, who said that you're not going to find the seat of consciousness in the brain. It doesn't reside there. It's not the most useful thing. The most useful way to understand our brain is how you said it. It's more like a radio receiver transmitter. And some of the psychedelic research is clearly showing that too, right? Like the expectation was that we were going to find that psychedelic experiences activated different brain regions or unusual patterns and so forth. That's not been the dominant set of findings over a decade. It quiets the brain. It seems to make everything calm down so you can experience what's here without all the noise. So it looks a little more like the brain functions as a filter for different layers of consciousness, and we experience it, most of it, as what we think of as a consensus reality. The questions about why it would be that way are attributable to another domain. We're not talking about that, but it is increasingly clear that it's very likely we are going to find definitively that consciousness does not sit in the brain, that we are part of a large field. So you were talking earlier about, when you started this passage, about secular religion and spirituality and humans needing it. And my thought was, we always assume that's because it's just kind of a weird artifact of whatever's driving our desire and our need to create mythology and stories and stuff is the same thing that drives our need for religion. But I don't think that's true, personally. I think it's always there because it's physics. I don't think it's religion. I think it's physics. And I think there's a part of our being human, our sensory capacities, beyond those that we are typically dominant, that we use: sight, smell, all those things we know about. There's another set that we also use without much awareness that we're using them. And that's drawing on a physics, a deeper understanding of the nature of reality than we humans have arrived at yet. And that theory, or that idea, is pretty well substantiated. It is increasingly well substantiated by sort of the breakthroughs that we're seeing in quantum physics and cosmology and consciousness in these studies. I mean, there's just if you start to pull all that research together, which I periodically do go look and see where the correspondence between science and what, say, the Eastern cosmologies say happen, what this is, what reality is, there's an increasing convergence. So I suspect one of the reasons it's so enduring is because it's empirically based. We just are getting it in ways we don't recognize and have a language for.
You just said language because we don't have the words for it. So it becomes this cloud in the head where, like, and you choke. Like, I used to talk to my husband and he would say, stop trying to psychoanalyze me. And that's because some people just don't have, I don't want to say desire. They just don't, their brain can't filter through this. It's just too much for them. Their reality, where they're going, what they think they need to do, maybe they're action oriented, and all of these thoughts clutter their head up and get in between their actions. I tend to be cerebral. It's not that I'm sitting on the couch all day long thinking, but I could sit on the couch all day and think. I really could. Give me a few good books on the couch and I could sit there all day long, walk the dogs, come back, do it again. So, I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody does that, and I understand that. And that's somewhat of, that's the age-old problem of people, different types of people, how we handle the environment that we perceive. And some people will say, the Sam Harrises and the Robert Sapolskys will say that there's no will, there's no free will. It's all determined. And I'm like, I think you guys are using the wrong word. Because there definitely is free will. We can make a decision to stop it. Like, I'm sorry. No, I'm not doing this anymore. And walk away from it. But we're reacting to it. So it is part of us, whatever the environment is, however we've grown up, whatever is around us, whatever we're interacting with, it is driving us. There's no doubt in my mind that it's driving us. But we, at any point in time, can turn the faucet off if we want to.
Theoretically, it's just what drives wanting. I mean, I don't want to get into a conversation about free will, but I have spent a lot of time looking at this.
Oh,
and I've arrived at, I think we have less free will than we think. However, we, like Janis, the local expression, Janis and Joy, of a much bigger process. I see myself, Janis, as sort of the pinky finger of an organism with a central nervous system. And the central nervous system has a lot of say over what's happening with my pinky, right? In ways that my pinky doesn't really understand. It just responds to my pinky. It's very easy for me to imagine. I mean, this metaphor only goes so far, so bear with me, but that my pinky thinks that it's doing this on its own, but it doesn't understand it's part of a much larger system that has got a lot of forces moving. The pinky can learn to get quiet enough to move its awareness up to the central nervous system because it's part of its organism. It's not separate, but that takes practice. And mostly our busy minds, the pinky is just like busy, blah, 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 blah. It's not even aware usually that it's part of something bigger. Once it becomes aware, that's the seeker phase. We think of it as people learn to start using mechanisms to get quieter. They start, but it's a practice to move the locus of awareness from the pinky to the central nervous system. And you go, oh, I see. It's a much different landscape from there.
I think that's the awakening.
It is. And that is the thing that, it's kind of different. I think my perception from now than previously is while the soul could drop in as a pinky and have an experience on Earth and have an awakening experience on Earth in the timeline we're in now. Right now it's happening to the collective. Many of us are going, oh, wait. And the central nervous system's like, wake up, it's time. Because, we've got a lot of pinkies thinking they're going a lot of different directions and they're doing damage and it's time for them to grow. It's time for the time is right for the locus of awareness of what we are and what we're part of to broaden for the collective. And it's I would argue, necessary time for that to happen on this planet for reasons that probably all of you and our listeners are well aware of. We have at least 3 paths to extinction at the moment. So it's a good time. And it's by getting quiet and going in and starting to become aware of this physics I was talking about earlier. It's real. And you're actually using it all the time. And you can, when you learn to just sense it, map it, use it, things do shift. And that is more and more people then are having the kinds of experience that I had in 2007 called the Kundalini awakening or some version of that. And I'm happy to talk about what that felt like for me, because I'm sure it's happening to some others too, if you'd like. But I'll stop here and just see if there's someplace you want to go.
Definitely want to hear these. I also had, I've also been awakened. So I'm interested to hear your experience because I don't necessarily think it's the same for everyone.
No, it's not. Very
I think There's some similarities that those might be considered synchronicities that maybe people can say, oh, wait a minute, you're right, and realize that they are on the same road.
Exactly. Yeah. And this question of, what's what we would call spiritual awakening and what's a mental health crisis becomes kind of gray. So it is more and more people are having that as actually one of the classes I'm going to teach. For anybody who is interested, go to My Soul Song. It's coming up, probably not till winter though, because I got to move first. You're absolutely right. At least in my experience, it's really unique. Everybody's awakening experience is really unique to them. Sometimes it's really marked and there's a very specific story someone can tell. I can tell that. Sometimes it's not. It's just more gradual. And sometimes you can find the genesis. Usually there's some kind of alchemical thing that happens. It's an event or a contact with a person or a teacher or something. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes people have had Kundalini awakenings that they can trace to just participation in, say, yoga regularly, because yoga is the physical act of yoga is actually working with the energy meridians that can create the conditions in which that awakening happens. The other thing people should know is it doesn't happen. It's not one time, and it's not like a switch. You're asleep or you're awake. Not like that at all. It's like I think there's drips for everybody, and then at some point there's usually something you're like, that changed my life, that changed my world, that something happened. I'll describe it to you for me, but everybody has their own story. And then your whole world tends to fall apart. That's the part people don't really talk about. There is this I remember, this event started, the run-up was in November 2007, and I won't go into a lot of details for personal reasons as well, as it's just take up too much time, but it got really, there was a moment, I was probably around December 23rd or 4th, in which several things happened. One of the first ones is, first I had this deep compulsion to just meditate. All I wanted to do was meditate. I was an academic. I had 2 young children. I have a life. I was just like, I just want to get through my day so that I can get to the evening where I start to read the books I was reading. I was reading Deepak Chopra and a variety of other teachers. I was just drawn to it. I'm like, I need to understand how it works. I had always had this history of anomalous stuff. I'd always had interest in spiritual stuff. I always had books on my bookshelf and stuff, but this was different. This was a drive that transcended even the most busy of lives. So in the late, at night, I would read, I would meditate. I knew I would want to chant. I'd gone to Kripalu, which is close to where I lived, and I think at the time, and got Mala and was chanting. And that, I didn't notice. I would meditate. It wasn't like I was noticing something specifically right there, but I remember this night in which I go to bed. After that, it was like my 3rd night with this new meditation regimen I started. And I wake up at 3 a.m. with what feels like a cattle prod at the base of my spine. It's like there's electricity. It woke me up out of a sleep, and it was not comfortable. It hurt. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then about 20 minutes in, it started to move. I could feel warmth moving up my spine. And at some point it started to feel actually quite lovely. It was like, oh, it just felt really good, but not at first. The next morning, my partner at the time woke up with the worst nightmare he'd ever had in his whole life. He dreamt he was carrying our son, who was very much alive and young, his dead body around the house. And I remember thinking, oh man, I wonder if whatever that was for me affected you. That was pretty weird. It happened again the second night. I had the same thing. Woke up in the middle of the night, deep pain, electrical pain in my spine, goes up my spine again. Anytime after that, I sat to meditate, and I would focus on my root chakra, like that, that base chakra. The chakras, by the way, are real. It would start again. So I learned not to do too much of it, because if I really did it a lot, it would activate a lot and it would hurt again. So I'm like, that was like one of the first really visceral physical experiences that I had. I was like, something is physically happening. From there, a couple nights later, I remember looking outside and going, oh my God, I understand something. I knew I didn't understand everything. I don't even know if that's possible from a human body, but I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Wow. It was so cool. I could see all the interconnection of stuff. I could see the placement of my life in a set of lives. I could see the connections of other people. It was beautiful. And all I wanted to do was just gaze at it. And because it was like being in a, I don't know, a multidimensional river stream. It was really fascinating. And it made things in my physical, empirical, lived life very clear. It's like it was very clear there were things I had been scared of that I needed to move on. And I had the courage and clarity to enact changes in my life that I could never have imagined even a month before being able to enact. I'm like, I don't want to live with fear as my master anymore. And I can see that some of my life is being sculpted out of what I'm afraid of. I don't want to do that. And more than just being able to say that to myself, I had the tools I needed. I had the clarity I needed. And things just synchronicities started happening everywhere. I needed something in order to make a move, and it just showed up. I was just like, what is going on? People showed up. So, somebody really important came into my life who was able to help me understand what was happening to me, because I'm like, I have no idea what this is. And he said, you're having a Kundalini awakening. And I'm like, well, I don't want to eat. Like I lost all my appetite. I really, really didn't want sugar, coffee, or caffeine or alcohol at all. Like I couldn't tolerate it, but even food was hard. All I want to do is meditate. Which I know some people would say like that, I can't have that happen in my life. And I totally get that. I will say that the structures were in place to allow my like completely falling apart stage, and it was like being rewired. It's like there was just a carve out in my life. It was just the right time for me to like go, I can barely function. And my life was like, okay, you don't have to function for the next couple of weeks. It's okay. Just let it happen. That was really huge. And then, as I said, things just kind of fell into place to allow what was a really, really massive life transformation, and completely unexpected in some ways. In other ways, once I was really looking at where my fear stuff was, I'm like, yep, this is the biggest one that's sitting here right now. So I guess I'm not surprised, but I had no idea what was going to happen after that. And within 6 months, life was really different than it had been. And stuff was starting to come up from the subterranean depths of my psyche, is all I can say. Like, not bigger than me, not faster than I could work with, but it was not. But I also understood, like, God, I understand why people resist awakening. This is not an easy path, because I was also called into higher integrity, higher honesty, higher clarity. I mean, if someone was falling apart in front of me, I needed to be the one. I knew I had the capacity to stay calm, steady, and clear, even if they could not see at all what I was seeing. And so a lot of my skills enhanced at the same time that the wheels were coming off the bus and being put on other buses. It was really an interesting time. But and I think that's one of the key markers of a Kundalini awakening, is it's truly life transformative. It may or may not touch the physical life somebody's in, although often it will in some way. But it's going to alter perception of pretty much everything in a way that's very enduring. It did not go away. It wasn't ephemeral. And it transformed my life in ways that were really, really enduring, and that there were a lot of weird magical elements. I mean, that's when I remember going, something's not what it seems. This is my empirical mind, my scientific mind was like, gather this data, like your own data, because something's happening. And this was what most fascinates me in the world, is this correspondence between the unseen and the seen. How do these happen? Because by then I had pretty much decided there is an unseen, but I didn't realize exactly how it worked. And I really wanted to. I have a mechanistic mind, and I was living it. And I got to tell you, that was 25 years ago. And right, 25 years ago, not quite 25 years ago, 2007, 8, but 20 years ago. It has only grown. That's my story.
I think in many cases that one of the elements that we'll find that when people go through this, it is trauma.
Yes.
It's trauma.
It can be.
And
that's true.
And, the thing is, like my chiropractor used to say, oh, you've got a high tolerance to pain. It really, some people will call a Band-Aid trauma, and other people, will get run over by a bus and like get up the next day and go to work.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. I'm one of those people. Not a bus, but maybe a Mack truck. Um, I, I, there's so much that I could talk about, and I don't want to like go into my experience other than saying the things that started the high strangeness kicked off when I realized that half of my life, and I mean half of my life, there were numbers following me around.
Uh-huh.
And I kept saying, what, does God want me to open 7-Eleven? Because 7-Eleven is all my entire life. And then I realized that other numbers were following me around. And it was in the back of my mind. And when 9/11 happened, I'm serious. When I tell you this, the 11 is part of it. 11, I don't know why, but it is. 11 is part of the equation. 111, 311, 911, 333. These are just numbers that I say to myself, oh, come on, what are the odds? 2 times a day it can happen. But when these things happen, there's something in my mind that goes, look around. And that's the other part. That's the key that opens the lock. Like you can say, oh, isn't that funny, 7-Eleven? Then you start thinking, and it's the key that opens the awareness to you to think, is there something going on here that I can't see, smell, feel, touch? What could that be? And then you start to feel it in the gut. At least this is me. I felt it in the gut going, something's not the way it used to be. I don't know what it is. I can't do all those same things anymore. Oh, let's go out to the beach, spend the whole weekend at the beach and drink ourselves into oblivion. No, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't know what it is. It's just not right. And things started happening to me. That was 9/11. So, and it didn't stop, and it hasn't stopped for me. And you said when you looked outside and, you sort of saw the connections, the spider web that connects everything. I look outside and when I see the trees, first of all, they're talking to me. And I know, okay, like you said, is this mental illness or mental awareness? It's both. They're talking to me, they're waving at me, and I just sit down and I quietly listen to the nothingness that they're telling me, and I understand. It's not words.
Exactly. The really, really cool thing about this moment is more and more people are having those experiences. And as a liver of those experiences, an enjoyer of it, how rich it is. Like, I don't need anything outside me anymore to just be entertained and engaged and learning and growing. It's wild. I like books and people and experiences. I still go out and do some of those, but like you, less, because there's so much going on here. And it's transcends here. It's fascinating. I love it. And it helps me love others. It helps me help others. I feel connected to the world as a whole. I feel like I do more good for the world when I'm meditating than when I'm outside doing anything, largely because I know I'm changing the field. I'm changing the soup that we're all connected, the lattice we're all connected in. And that seems to me some of the biggest work happening here on the planet right now is at that level. I know there's a ton of us who are in our awakening and our experience are doing that because we are the transformation that the universe that we need to see here. So it's super cool time to be alive, but I know it's dicey as all hell and it feels very crazy making sometimes.
Yeah, because I think it's not so much that everyone will say, oh, you have to think positively, and people who are around you who are negative, it's not that simple. Although,
yeah,
on the surface it makes sense, but it's not that simple. It's not so much that you need everybody turning around to you saying, yes, you're right. Yes, that's good. Yes, you need people saying, I don't know, jumping off a cliff, maybe you oughtn't do that. But what you do need to do is to learn how to be able to, separate the wheat from the chaff. You need to be able to say, this is bullshit in my life. Not that it's negative so much. It's just bullshit. It's just cluttering stuff up. And maybe I don't need it. Right around the time, again, that, I stopped drinking alcohol when I had that, like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I just stopped. It was just like, done. I don't ever need another drink. So the same thing happened with marijuana. It became legal, and I'm like, nah. I'm like, no, I'm actually be able to put myself, like, sobriety is the new high.
I like that. I just want to
and make anything happen to me while I'm sober.
I just wanted two thoughts before we go too further. I want to talk about coherence, and I want to talk about states of consciousness. So coherence, the first part, you talked about positive thinking, and it is, on the surface, it's not entirely wrong in the sense that, at least my understanding at this point of how reality gets formed here, is that thought is directionality and emotion is the charge. It's like the flagella. It sends it off in a particular direction, and then, especially if it meets with others, other people doing the same thing, then it creates in the physical way. So we do need to be mindful of what we think, of how our thoughts are directed. The problem is that we have many layers of right below the consciousness and subconscious that are also doing that. It's thinking its own thoughts. It may not be registering them, but it's sending it out. So you can't just think positive thoughts without coherence between all these layers of self. And that requires some excavation. That's the deeper inner work. That's go to counseling and figure out what pockets you're not seeing that are producing in the world, and bring them all into coherence and integration. Because once you have that, and then the thought comes up and it resonates and it's powerful, right? You learn how to do that. Otherwise, we're all just, it's like all these different parts of us are spitting things out and creating all over the place, and it often creates a chaotic mess because we're not aware of half of it. So that's why, when we talk about spiritual bypassing, people find the path, they have an awakening, they're like, oh, this is amazing, I'm just going to think positive thoughts. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I want to say, you got to keep going, and a lot of it is the stuff you don't like. There's going to but the stuff that you don't like is going to come up so that it can be integrated, cohered, and you can become an incredible experiencer of and vessel, instrument for positive action in the world. But you got to understand how the physics works, and we're just kind of learning that. And the other thing is states of consciousness. I totally get the stuff about sobriety. That makes perfect sense. I do think it's possible that part of what's coming for humanity is going to jolt us even into states of consciousness that are very unfamiliar. Like, imagine a contact experience. So you mentioned Gary Nolan before. We were talking, so we're talking about UAPs, which, for your listeners who don't know, it's UFOs. It's the new language for that. It's real. They're real. It's here. It's coming. It's coming. Disclosure's coming, meaning we are going to, as a species, find out that we are not alone in the universe. It's quite a busy neighborhood we're in, and it's time for us to find out. We're ready. But we're not going to feel ready. And as soon as contact actually happens in a more visceral way than it's already happening, because some of it, I'm convinced, is already happening for many, if not all of us. I mean, there's a lot of preparation going on. It's going to potentially feel very shocking. Like, the psyche could feel like it's on psilocybin or something. Like, it'll feel really foreign. So if you have experience with altered states of consciousness, it might be helpful. I think it's one of the reasons, because otherwise, for people who've never really experienced an altered state of consciousness, especially something not pretty different than alcohol that most of us are used to, that's pretty much where we go. It might be a little harder. That is not a recommendation that people go out and use psychedelics. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that I don't know that it's just as clear a line anymore between, that's substances are bad or good. I think we have to be conscious that they are vehicles of experience, and if you use them to expand and understand spaces that you've never been in, and to find the steadiness, that center that is never affected by any drug, that part of you that's like, okay, it's okay, just stay here. You know exactly where you are. It could be potentially helpful depending on what's coming our way. I really don't know how it'll go, though. Just throwing it out there.
The drugs and, the drugs and alcohol are, I'm going to use another term, medicines.
I think
And
alcohol is a suppressant. I think some of the other drugs, the plant medicines we have out there, are openers, but they have to be used very, very mindfully and carefully. But I think alcohol is really meant to numb us. It was part of a larger. I'm pretty convinced there are, we talk about a control program. There's something that has suppressed humanity's consciousness for reasons that are probably a mix of good and bad. I don't think it's all nefarious.
Some of our, it's some of the body's requirement for survival.
Yeah, and we can only, human psyche can only expand and open, do so much. We're an instrument bounded by like any other instrument. So, but I think we're getting upgrades as instruments, as receiving transmission instruments. All of us here right now are.
Alcohol tends to be like this substance that earlier versions of ourselves discovered that was social, and that created a vehicle for some amount of ritual. And then after that it got totally out of hand. But I'm a child of, I was born in 1955, so I went through the 60s in a grand way. And I don't think I could do psychedelics now. I'm very glad I did them then. A lot of them then. And I'm also very glad that I didn't freak out. Okay. The experiences that I had then, I remember now. And I think they helped me pull it together.
Yes.
That's why when I started, and I said, I've been having these connections for a long time. I think they started then. I was too young. I was 14, 15 years old when I was experimenting with drugs.
Me too.
So, right. So, I didn't know what the experience meant. I had many experiences, and now as I get older, I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it now. Now I understand. I was tripping, and now I understand why loud music it angers me. Loud crowds and music just like trigger me. Like, that's because I was tripping at a Grateful Dead concert for the 50th time. And I wasn't having a good time. I was controlling my trip, but I was borderline having a bad trip. But it triggers that experience where I'm like, no, not for me. I'm not getting anything but I'm not getting anything but chaos out of this.
Well, you actually point to something that's super important. I mean, as awakening happens, as activation happens, however you want to frame it, as spiritual awareness happens, it's just awareness happens. We all become more sensitive. That is there are some universal characteristics, so our stories are all unique, as we said earlier, but there are some pretty universal characteristics to the experience. And one of them is crowds, sounds, stimulation becomes harder to absorb, partly because it's like your antenna are now turned up, the external arrays, the subtle sensing are just naturally turned up, and it feels like an assault sometimes. You're like, whoa. It's why it's hard to be in large places, big crowded places. People start to just feel like they want to go in, they want to go away. I don't want to be at Disneyland after 45 minutes. I cannot go to places like that anymore. I don't have the capacity to screen it out anymore. And I don't want to. I don't want to work on, it is kind of interesting. There are a lot of people will assume that since they can't sense it or whatever, that the person over here that is a sensor that way is being oversensitive, or there's, clearly if there was something happening, I'd sense it. And I would say that's actually the opposite. You just have your dials turned down really low. That person's hearing what would be a really screechy loud sound, but it's in energy and it's all over the place. They're more sensitive. And actually that's where we want to go as a species. I know that, it's like we should get tougher and more stoic. Nope. That will kill us. That is killing us. You need to become more sensitive. Things need to be turned up. And as a result, you would expect to see some of what we are seeing. I'm not suggesting this is necessarily linked, but I do notice that like rates of crime are going down despite what's happening here in the United States and National Guard and crap like that. Rates of crime are actually dropping. And I think, just one of my working theories, is that some of it is because our dials are collectively going up and we can't tolerate as much yuckiness. You know, it's hard to live it, to enact it, to be mean, to cruel, cold, to take things. And it's harder just to get off the couch and to go out into the world. I mean, I've been hearing for several years people in my world that aren't necessarily attuned to any of this stuff. I don't really necessarily talk about it with them, but a lot of comments about, I just don't really want to do what I used to want to do. I don't even really want to socialize. I don't really want to go out to parties anymore. You know, I just don't. I'd rather kind of be home. I kind of find myself going to bed early or just wanting to lay in the dark. And I'm like, that's exactly what you would expect to see if the dials are all going up. And because we're all becoming more aware of the sounds that we make as a species. And, you know, a lot of it's kind of chaotic and it doesn't feel good in that arena. And presumably if we make it and, we will create societies that are still externally focused, we'll do fun things, but we'll probably do it differently just to be in honor of the increased sensitivity that we all have. You could only be, because part of what comes with that enhanced awareness is the natural connection to nature, because it's alive. The planet's alive. Everything's alive. Yeah. Yeah. And so how do you kill it? How do you chop something down if it's speaking to you? Not that we won't have, you know, like we have to, but it's a really different relationship.
That's why in many, you know, many of the ancient rituals, they would
honor,
you know,
like Avatar.
I'm sorry, honor.
Yes.
That's why I say a lot of people will throw the baby out with the bathwater. They will throw away all of the past, the history of the past, by basically saying, "Oh, we were bad people then. We did bad things, bad us," and they're not looking at some of the incredible details, the beauty. That, you know, that trauma, we need to go through that trauma as an individual and as a culture and as a civilization to move on. We need to recognize that was bad, but that was not, because that's the baby. That's the bathwater. Chuck it. That's the baby. Let's, you know, and, you know, some of the things that, you know, I think about all the time. Now, I'm a Western philosophy girl. And I studied the classics, whereby I ended up in marketing, but that's besides the point. And that's another story. The classics have come back to me full force as I retire. I read more. Everything that I do, I read back, and I'm thinking to myself, what a fascinating life cycle it has been. And it keeps cycling. And you've got to recognize those cycles, just like I'm going to cycle through something and become aware. The civilizations cycle through.
That's right.
And occasionally we're totally wiped off the face of the earth.
Right. There's so much evidence for that. It's true. And I mean, if you look at the Eastern cosmologies, they all speak in terms of yugas, so ages, right? They're very, very long, but it's not linear. I mean, I know and the Western mind tends to go, well, we were apes, whatever. No, apes are cool. But like we were these like dumb dudes down here and now we've linearly progressed. So all these mythological stories that these ancient cultures have are just, you know, they're just their stories that they kind of made up out of their heads or whatever. Now we are, for example, starting to realize that maybe some of those stories are actually rooted in truth and they weren't so dumb after all, and that we may have actually gone through this multiple times. The Eastern cosmologies, which they're never linear, they suggest cycles, as you just said. So there's just cycles that are very, very long. They're yugas. We are leaving, I think it's like 26,000 years. There's broad agreements that we're leaving the Kali Yuga, which is the yuga of the deepest darkness. And darkness can translate into like the deepest cruelty. And we've definitely seen that in the Middle Ages and so forth. And we still see it right now. It's happening in Gaza. and elsewhere. But they also is what the deepest understanding of the Kali Yuga is the age of deep forgetfulness. We don't remember what we are. We don't remember where we are. We don't remember how we are. We don't remember what we're in. We don't remember. So out of our ignorance, we perpetrate. We believe that resources are scarce. We believe that death is the worst possible thing that could ever happen. We don't know, and we act out of things on each other and around in that reflect that ignorance. But it's part of a natural cycle. There's a broad consensus in those communities that we are on the cusp of Satyuga, which is the age where you're kind of coming back into the age of for remembrance. So we are here at an extraordinary time. It's a time where humanity is starting to remember again. This is not new knowledge. It's actually quite old, and it's embedded in our DNA. It's ours. It's our heritage. It's our birthright. And we're alive at a time when some of those things are just becoming more available than they ever were. So, but there's also a broad acknowledgement that passage from Kali Yuga to Satyuga is chaotic. You'll have magic and mystery and amazingness coupled with, some of the most horrific things you could possibly imagine humans doing. There's a tension. There's going to be resistance, massive resistance, but that's normal. Nothing wrong with it. It's just, but it gets to get dicey. And I, like you, I'm pretty convinced that we've been reset before. We've wiped ourselves out before. Here we are again. Will it be different? I don't know. I think so. I have reasons to believe so, but I don't know. So usually when I'm working with people, including myself, especially myself, I'm like, do your death meditations. I just want to be conscious and kind and as less resistance as I can to anything that happens, including this, because I know I'm not this body. But while I'm here, I'm going to do the best I can do to assist this passage and hope that you and me and our children, everybody I love, have long lives that are they're going to be amazing. They're going to be so different than anything any of us can imagine just because of technology. For example, technology coupled with disclosure and awareness of the deeper truths of reality are going to make for some pretty interesting times up ahead.
People might think, what do I do when this happens? I mean, I had a recent conversation with somebody, and they have recently lost their partner.
Mm-hmm.
And they came out of this swinging and very angry about world events and becoming very loud on social. And I mean, for me, what I did when I came out of this, I realized, I could be totally angry at everything because I'm feeling this and no one else wants to, go along with me. And I could be angry. Or I could find a way to solve the problem. And for me, everything became very localized. And I had to become very responsible. So something that you said was that because of your profession, that if you see someone that that needs help, you feel compelled to help them. What I'm sort of saying is that if you take a look at your skills and your talents and who you are and what you can do, and you're honest about those things, and then you start reaching out to people on small, very local community levels, you can recognize, I can help somebody here. I mean, being an activist or going to a protest, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm merely saying, but you may actually be able to save somebody down the block. Aside from being, carrying a sign and running around and perhaps not changing anything and getting arrested. I'm merely saying that if we all become that much more responsible and take it to heart. People are starving. Oh, maybe I'll, volunteer in the soup kitchen. Or, I'll go to the local church and see what I could do for homeless people. I don't know what it is. I'm just saying, see if you could solve it on the micro level. You're not going to save the world. You're not going to change the world. But if everyone changes one person, suddenly it's like this wave.
Gosh, there's several things that come to mind. There's such good points. I mean, I've recently revisited the word Dharma in Sanskrit. It's, it's a pretty central part of how I think about my world. And Dharma that translates into sacred duty. And I was like, I love that. It is not Dharma. The way that I had rendered it was just like the highest right thing for me to do in any moment. What's my Dharma? And that works. But I think this idea of sacred duty gets me even closer. It's like, what is my sacred duty right here, right now? If I'm being really honest, in any given moment, sometimes my sacred duty is to be quiet and to do nothing, even it just depends. It depends on the context, right? Like, I have a person in my family who's functionally homeless that I adore this person. And I could recognize that me trying to get him money and stuff. I mean, the stuff that he might need beyond the things that I was able to give wasn't going to serve his growth and evolution, because I could see that he was in his own karmic path and he needed to know that he could be totally self-sustaining. So, and it was confusing. Like he was in my space for my home for a while. And anyway, at some point he went to go live in the mountains, Rocky Mountains, the end of March. I'm like, you're gonna die. Like, I just don't know how you bring a tarp and a tent to the Rocky Mountains in late March. But he was absolutely adamant. I was not going to fight him. I had to honor his path, but I stayed receptive. So for me, a lot of my Dharma ends up translating into, how do I stay in a receptive, loving space? Sometimes that receptive, loving, compassionate space guides me to be quiet. Don't interfere with a process that you can see is underway, even if it looks like that person needs rescuing. I will say that person is in a radically different place right now than he has ever been. And if I had tried to stop the process from happening, he wouldn't be there. I'm quite sure about that. But it's a risk. You just never know. But it really is like, and you can't really know. I guess the deeper is like, all right, it's my orientation that I try to stick to. And then I listen and I try to get discern. I try to be in discernment. What's coming from my fear? What's coming from my sense of it's just this intuitive sense of what I can facilitate happening next. And then what do I have to let go of? Because I have no idea. I don't know anybody's path. I don't know what's right for anybody. I don't even really always know what's right for me. I just know from moment to moment. So it is this interesting alchemy of all those things. And the invitation for me is like, all right, just how can I hew to that as often as possible? And when I forget, and I just start going on automatic pilot, come back into remembrance as soon as you realize you're in forgetfulness. It's a yoga. It's definitely work.
We're human. So, we're going to create drama every once in a while, but if you could say, oh, then that's okay. You've realized it, right? I'm not a really social animal. So generally speaking, when I'm out in a huge social setting, I will, open mouth, insert foot. And I know that. So what do I do? So, I'm either really quiet when I'm out, or I just don't go out. I don't put myself in those situations.
Smart.
Because, come back. Everyone else is going to have had a good time. And I'm going to be like, I can't believe I said that. Or what did I say that for? And, we're very sensitive creatures, but how we translate that sensitivity, that empathy, that what we perceive is going on around us, can really throw us for a loop, and that's part of the problem. Is and you said that's part of the hard work. That's very hard work.
Yeah, there are those of us who tend to give very, very little and really are going to need to show up more. And there are those of us who would give everything away to save others from suffering, which is a wonderful impulse. But neither are usually the only or best way. It's, there is some pieces of both of that. And it's really finding it. And it's not universal. I can't give you the formula. So no, it's like, it's really it's our own calling. So ultimately, over and over and over, I get called inside. Listen, Janice, listen, relax, align, breathe. It's okay. Allow. Don't fight it. Just allow it to pass through. Watch, observe. Don't go away. Stay present. Don't get so scared that I'm up and out and I have no idea what's happening. I'm just reacting. Don't do that. If you do that, come back. It's okay. Be gentle. Don't fight. It has been a hard way to live, but man, Joy, it's been amazing. I wish I could give it to everybody. I'm like, stay present, do the work, because what you see around you, what you feel, what you experience it's magical. Like it's crazy. Synchronicities, numbers, people, words on billboards, right? That you need them. You're like, okay, thank you. People calling.
I say that, there's a miracle moment. And if you're not watching for it, it's gone.
I know. And how many and it's happening for everybody.
As simple as I'm watering the plants and suddenly a wasp flies by and it just in front of me long enough for me to say, wow, what an incredible body you have. Oh, there's a little miracle. I just did a thing with a wasp. And somebody else would have gone, oh, it's a wasp. And I'm like, ooh.
Exactly.
And I'm like, that was a little miracle. And that's what I'm saying. It is a matter of your perception. And once you become aware of that, how you perceive things, I'm afraid of bugs. Okay, I get it. But, come on. I love bugs. I adore bugs. I don't know. I'm not so thrilled with cockroaches, but essentially I adore bugs. And I don't like, I love all animals, but I don't understand snakes, and they scare me. They just scare me because they look straight at you, and you're like, what are they going to do?
Exactly.
Like, do I run? Or no? Do I stand here? What do I do? I've seen bears, but I've never, come that close to a bear. So I guess it would be a deer in the headlights with any large animal. But snakes and cockroaches, which I have come in contact with close by, they creep me out. They just totally creep me out. So let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room. So UAP. Okay. So I would say without, I'm not saying that I have been abducted or that I've experienced anything close to what other people have experienced. But what I can say is that there's a lot of unconscious things going on around me, or maybe it's conscious, I don't know, that I'm able to connect with, and I respect, and I do not engage with. I don't think I have the ability or the intelligence to engage with it. But I am very aware it's around me, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Now, other people say, oh, I see things in the sky. Oh, plasma balls. Oh, whatever. I have synchronicities. So, like I said, the numbers roll. Books will appear that I need. Like, I'll be thinking of something, and a book will suddenly somebody recommends a book. I'm like, oh, thank you. Diana Pasolka talks about that. She, and it has happened to me 1,000 times. Yeah. I'll need something, and it will just knock on my door. Right. And the other thing, it's not $1 million that I'm knocking at the door, but it can be $25. It can be $100. It will just knock on the door. I'll be like, wow. Yeah. Got it. Thank you. So do you think that I'm filtering out what's really happening? And do you think most people are filtering out what's happening and other people are not filtering it out and they're seeing what's happening? I'm not exactly sure how the other is making itself apparent.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because the non-human intelligence that we typically associate with UAP, there's lots of bodies of thought, but let's just say the dominant body are like mostly physical corporeal beings of some nature that are around. They transcend. They have abilities and skills and technologies that humans just don't and wouldn't understand exactly, but that they're physically located somewhere. even if it's another dimension, but they're physically located somewhere. Versus sort of being a sliver of what we would call God consciousness that every being is. So that doesn't require, or it includes NHI, non-human intelligence, but they may, anywhere in the cosmos, not just here. So there's two sort of layers of question, like, well, we're in a soup of interconnected stuff as that stuff, and synchronicities and things showing up and books and stuff are all really normal in that space. I think a lot of people do, and historically have just ignored it. Like the anomalies, whatever in my research work, I use statistics a lot. We almost always talk about the mean, we're the anomalies, the outliers we tend to kind of ignore. In this case, those anomalies and outliers, which are ubiquitous and almost everybody has them at some point in their lives to a greater or lesser degree if they start to notice it, are always there. And everybody, and the more you notice it, the more you see it, the more it happens. And it's because it's a dynamic exchange with the conscious field. You're in a sea of consciousness. As you start to go, oh, I'm in a sea of consciousness, it goes, yes, you're in a sea of consciousness. You want to play? It just enhances it. Non-human intelligence engaged with humanity is part of that. And there's certainly a lot of experiences that people have that are very much in alignment with the set we just talked about. That could be, the genesis could be non-human intelligence of that nature. There could be specific beings talking, or exchanging with you or others. Sometimes it's harder to know exactly how to differentiate that. Are these NHI communicating with me? Is this the field of consciousness and myself basically communicating with me? In some cases, you really can't know. In some cases, you can, because they physically appear in your room, or you were taking aboard a craft and you have physical memories and associations. You can describe it. Other people might have been there with you. So that does happen. That is real. I think the question humanity is going to have, like, is that for real? That's less like, blah, blah, blah. But I would say I have deep dives as a scientist more than any part of myself into this. And what I would say to listeners who are skeptical is go look. Just start wherever you want and tell me what you find, because everybody I know, smart, very well-educated, grounded people, they go in there with an open mind and they go, oh my God, it's real. There's a ton of evidence, tons of evidence. The government's come out and said it multiple times, not just ours, others. It's been going on. There is exchange happening. What are the agendas? I can speculate, but I can't tell you I know for sure. I think there are multiple agendas. I think there are multiple species. I think it's time that humanity is being invited into awareness of it. That's what's happening now. So that's good news, and maybe the bad news, depending on how scared that makes you or makes one. But I'm quite convinced that we're on the planet for another several years. Those of us who are still here are going to become aware of extraordinary things and probably even see some stuff. But I can't, it's just much harder to answer that question of, is what you're interacting with NHI? To some degree, yeah, because anything non-corporeal or corporeal that's not human is non-human intelligence. So that includes all of consciousness that may be playing with us. But beings from craft, harder to say. If you repeatedly get images, because the way that the communication happens is usually transmissions happen in packets of information. It's be images, just knowings. You don't know how you know it. You don't know why you know it. But if you get repeated images of beings, a specific kind of being in particular, chances are good that there's some communication happening. And I think a lot of people are getting communicated with in their sleep too, because we're all getting prepared.
Mm-hmm. I've asked them multiple times, do not show up in my house. Just don't.
You know what you want.
I'm not capable of handling it. I will pee in my pants. Do not do that. And I don't want to be in my pants. Please. No, that's what, it's not a pretty picture. Yeah. So I don't like to be, I don't mind being in awe, but I don't want to be scared. So, I think of it, I feel protected. And I know, again, I just do feel protected. Yeah. And I thank, the lucky stars. Often I'm just like, thank you.
You know, I would, you know, for anybody who's listening who's really curious, I would say we shouldn't be too scared. I know it is a scary concept. I know there are probably species that don't necessarily have humans' best interest at heart. That's possible, maybe even probable.
We've been here forever.
Yeah, and we've got, and there are,
oh, what, we're scared now?
Yeah.
We've been here forever.
Yeah, and we're
all of our human life has interacted with them. We've called them so many different names. We've known they've been here.
Yes, right. And I think we're part of a web in a way that we don't understand. We're not being victims being acted upon in the ways that we might think that we are. So any tendency to like, you know, oh my God, we got to prepare for an alien invasion, I'd say that is the wrong term. And you're probably just going to cause more suffering for yourself and others by just learn to go inside, learn to use your senses, learn to get quiet, learn to expand, trust trust your instincts, ask for protection, because you can have it. We're all, ultimately, even the most advanced beings are part of the same consciousness field that we are. There is far less separation than any of us could possibly imagine. But this is mostly really unbelievably exciting. It's an extraordinary privilege to be alive and aware, of what's happening, so that you can watch and so that you can play with your wasp rather than get scared. What a gift that is. And I feel like we're just on the cusp of just extraordinary experiences as a human, but they're not going to be for the faint of heart. And any pull, anybody's listening, you've got to pull inside, you got to pull to kind of learn more. Please honor it. You'll be grateful, and you'll be able to enjoy the ride more.
I really, I don't think that, I think that fear is one of the first things that we need to get a grip of, because we can be afraid of everything and anything.
We are, and we tend to shoot first and then, ask questions.
Yeah. And the point is, it's to some, statistically, we're all going to die. Statistically speaking, we're all going to die. We don't know what death is. Worrying about it is moot. It may not last long. Odds are death doesn't last long.
It's a portal out.
And it's not.
Yeah, you had a portal in through birth, and you have a portal out through death. There's no other way. I remember dying. I have multiple deaths.
It's not the end.
It's usually there's like this. Usually this. I remember sometimes being afraid right before. I remember like that, and then there's just this massive relief, and it's like, oh, it's really good. Exactly. So the way I'm like, this is the hard part, actually, being alive and being not remembering so much, and kind of having to kind of trust things that I can't touch or remember. By design, I wanted this experience. I'm not a victim to it, but this is the hard part. Death after is the fun part.
Yeah, I think I think one of the most important things for everyone is to itemize their fears. That's literally nipping it at the bud. It's like identifying the fears. When you feel an emotion, when something overcomes you, immediately say, what is it I'm feeling? And then try to circumvent and have it become a cerebral event. Circumvent what's going on. Like, stop. Okay. Recede what is going on. Maybe, journal it. But actually, in the beginning, walk away from it to get an idea of what's going on. If you can, obviously. There are many different types of fears, but I started taking walks. So when I started feeling the anxiety exponential, I would say, dogs, let's go. And I would go out, and I would just go.
Yeah, there's more tools and skills and knowledge holders and wisdom holders than there's ever been. So there are a lot of pathways to reducing inner anxiety. And I do think we live in a time where people are going to have to use them. We're learning that, right? I mean, my other set of work is all in mental health, and I get lots of calls from parents in schools and other places that are seeing increases in self-injury, and a lot of the stuff that showed to me, people are getting very anxious everywhere. And the field is anxious. There's a lot of fear in the field. So people who are sensitive are going to be picking that up. It may or may not even be yours. So the need to do what you just said is going to be just going to increase for a while. And the pathways to doing it are more prolific than ever. There's lots of different ways. We were talking before we got on about Qigong, and there's yoga and, meditation. There's lots of paths. I would urge people to use them. And just to what you said, I remember there was a period in my life that was super anxiety provoking. And I ended up making a menu of practices. I thought of like 10 things that work for me: baths, being in nature, just laying in the dark, breathing, listening to like theta wave kinds of sounds because it down regulates me, journaling. I'm reading something uplifting. I had a number of things, drawing, coloring in my mandala color book, touching my kitties just because they're soft. I mean, there were a number of things, and I would make myself choose 3 every day. And even if one was just 5 minutes, I just like, you got to do 3. Usually it was 1 in the morning and 2 after the end of my day. And it made a massive difference in my ability to be with the massive amounts of uncertainty and fear that was coming up for me. So I like you, I think it's really smart to be very thoughtful about it and to be aware of when you need it and then to execute on it. It's great if you can build it into your life every day.
Because you say, oh, I recognize this behavior. I recognize it. Okay, so it's time to do X.
Yeah, I have a friend who talks about that as dashboard lights. Like, oh, my dashboard light's going off. I better, and don't ignore it. It's like ignoring your oil light is going on. You need to put it in there. You're going to seize. your engine's going to seize. It's kind of the same thing. Don't ignore it.
Right. And it's not the responsibility of everybody around you to stop. It's your responsibility.
Exactly.
So you're not telling everybody, oh no, you can't talk about this. No, it upsets me. You need to say, this is upsetting me. Why? Now you have a journey.
That's right.
And it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility because there's going to be something, again, glass half full. There's going to be something good out of this, right? Because you're going to get it. It's like a muscle. You build a new muscle.
It's exactly stronger. New muscles.
And so the next time you see the cockroach, you don't go, oh, it's just like the wasp, isn't it?
And maybe I'll just step back once or twice. It's okay.
I'll watch it from back there. But
it'll be fascinating. 2 steps away.
Oh, it's fascinating there. Oh, okay, I'm back. So this has been a great. Obviously, we could go on forever. How can people connect with you, Janis? Where are you? People want to learn
so
more.
I would urge people to go to mysoulsong.com. My Soul Song, as it sounds. That's where you can contact me or find out more about stuff that I'm doing there. My other mental health focused website is not up yet. That'll be Janis Whitlock Consulting. I do work with schools and parents and stuff on, helping their kids deal with anxiety and their own anxiety, about their kids' anxiety, things like that. So you can see there's a natural touch point, but for right now, the consciousness work and the subtle sensing work that we're talking about is really sits there. So you can contact me there and find out more about who I am and what I offer, and be in touch.
Cool. I greatly appreciate you coming on and your patience through the scheduling.
Oh no, boy, yes. And yours to my scheduling snafus. Yes, thank you.
It was all wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Joy, for everything you are doing and bringing. I really appreciate it. Okay.
And that's a wrap.